Hi, and welcome to Field Security Training. In this session, we're going to be talking how to either transit through or live in either slightly risky or dangerous nations. Okay, so as always, if you've got any questions as we're going through this training serial, just chuck them in the comments below and I'll get back to you immediately. Or alternatively, if you've got any questions later on in weeks, months, years in the future, please just chuck them into the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. So the first bit is how to transit through. So this scenario here is if, for example, you're either going through a particular nation and you're just trying to stay safe between going from a fairly benign to another benign, but you happen to have to go through a slightly more risky nation. Or alternatively, you're actually living in the country and you're having to go from one place to another and you're trying to work out how to make sure you're traveling safely. So first off, let's look at transit accommodation. The hotel room. I know this probably sounds a little bit James Bondy, but if you assume that your room is bugged or this particular nation is just curious as to what's going on, then or the infrastructure, the people own the hotel, then just assume it's bugged, and then that way it just saves an awful lot of hassle because then you keep conversations appropriate. The next little tip is if you're planning to go away from your hotel room or where you're particularly staying, and you're worried about people coming in or out, one little thing to just trying to deter people from doing that is just to have the TV on a little bit loud. Now, if you stick it on something that's got a continual voice going on, so for example like the news, as opposed to like a film, which is completely different in terms of the sort of way it makes a sound. If you stick on the news, put the volume up loud enough so that when if you go outside of the room, close the door behind you and listen on the room, and if it just sounds like there's a voice and a conversation going on, that's just enough of a deterrent from someone actually just wanting just to kind of like come into your room. The next bit is, do you know what? Let's try and stop people from going into the room in the first place and potentially just have some form of door wedge. So if you're already in the room, you're settling down for the night, you want to just have that assurance everything's going away, just have a little bit of thinking. Most hotels have some form of lock and some form of chain. If you have the chain and you just make it really, really tight like this, even if they manage to get through that lock, that chain, which they can't break into, will just be tight. So it just gives you that little bit more protection. Another thing you perhaps want to do is just have some door wedges and just have those in your luggage so that you can just ram these underneath the door. So if someone's trying to push their way through, it just makes that little bit harder. You could go to a slightly more sort of extreme sort of a bit more James Bondy of having a hidden camera, especially if you're going away. So if you have that hidden camera, so that's like a teddy bear, or it could be stuck in any form of different things. You can have these little devices, they're really, really tiny. You can just hide them in different places, and then from that you can just go back and review. Do you know what, if anyone's actually been into your room and they've tried to set anything up, or they've just gone through your stuff. Alternatively, if you're walking down corridors or you're a bit suspicious about people who are sort of perhaps following you or nearby, you can actually get these small little cameras that sit in fairly benign things. So this one's inside a inside a pen, and from that you can just record the people going around, which might be just useful for you to sort of refer to later, just to make sure that you're keeping an eye on what's going on around you. Also, your luggage and different things. I'll bring up the next point as well. It's all about aligning markers. So if you can, on your luggage or on your various possessions, just remember how you set them when you leave. You can then check to see if they're in the same place when you leave them, come back. So that could be as simple as just having the zips sort of tied and placed in a particular location. That, when you look around, it aligns to a marker, perhaps on where there's a drawer nearby or something that you know yourself as to where they were, so that when you come back, you can see if they've actually been tampered or fiddled with. Burn phones. So over the years, I'm sure you're like me and you collect a gazillion different old phones. These are really, really handy. Or alternatively, when you're in country, just get something fairly simple so that you can effectively just use as a burn phone. Buy a local SIM, stick it in there. Only use it in that nation, particularly if you're working in a dangerous nation and you're transiting from one place to another. Just use that phone in that one place. And when you're outside of that nation, just don't use it. Just have the battery out, have the SIM out and everything, and only switch it on when you're actually in that nation. So moving about now, conversations. If you're worried about people picking up what you're up to, or hopefully you're in that particular nation, just make sure that your conversations are appropriate for the country that you're actually transiting in. Use encrypted messaging. So Messenger on Facebook is an unencrypted example of a messaging service like text messages. There's no encryption whatsoever, and it's basically in clear, so you can effectively just get into that. There are other encrypted sort of devices, so your WhatsApps, Signal. If you're trying to work out which one to do, I'll put a link into so you can actually understand the technology behind them and make your own assessments. But the really important thing is just to make sure that you just use some form of encrypted device. Also, you can get, if you've got particular electronic devices and you don't want anyone to sort of tamper with them or pick up their electrical signal, you can put them in what is a Faraday bag. It's nothing clever. It's effectively just a sleeve that's got like a metal film around it. A cheap version of it is literally just tin foil around it, and you can effectively just put that there, and it just stops any form of communications getting to your phone. So if you're perhaps concerned about a particular nation sort of trying to get into your phone or anything like that. Equally, if you need to just decide on your story as you're going through, so if you get questions about different things, the important thing is not to lie, because that'll just end up in all sorts of a mess, but just make sure that you've got a consistent story as you're transiting through or moving about, and also just make sure you relax, because you know what, or if you feel sort of agitated, just pretend to relax at the very least, so that you just go through and you just look like someone who's just going about their normal business and there's nothing untoward going on, which I hope is the case. And the other bit in terms of moving around and transiting and just trying to reduce your profile is to blend in. So blending in. So what do I mean by that? A couple of examples here that we can just go through. Are you rememberable? So is there sort of particular things that you've got on you that make it easy, then you just stand out from the crowd? So for example, we've got headphones here, or sunglasses, or you've got a bright coat, or whatever it is, tattoos. Just have a little bit of think as a sort of things that might make you a little bit more memorable than the average person. Walking. Now everybody has got their own gait, i.e. kind of like how their legs move from one left foot to the right foot and back. Some of you might have an unusual gait. Everybody's got a particular style, but it's also quite unique. It's a little bit like a fingerprints, that every individual has got a particular gait, and it's just, if you've got a particularly unusual one, it's worth recognizing that. Clothes. The colour of the clothes, bright colours are easier to see than sort of more natural or earthy sort of colours. So if you look at these sort of two examples here, the red is clearly easier to spot than the darker colours. And likewise, do you know what? You might be in a nation where there's an awful lot of bright colours, and actually the most people wear bright colours. Wear bright colours. Just blend in. Pick the colour system that works with the most people that you're surrounded by. Eye contact. Do you know what? If you make eye contact with someone will remember you a lot easier. So please do make sure that when you're moving around, minimise your sort of eye contact, so you just bring that little bit less attention to yourself. Walk with an appropriate level of confidence. Now this is perhaps a little bit more tricky to do. So effectively what you don't want is too much confidence, because that brings in too much attention. Equally, if you're walking around slightly underconfidence, that will also draw a little bit more attention to you as well. So it's trying to find that sort of natural, steady, happy place in between. Also, make sure you do have an element to how you're walking in terms of confidence, because if we link with other bits, in terms of sort of petty crime, you are more likely to be sort of targeted if you will come across as an underconfident individual. So walk with an element of confidence. Okay, movement. It's an awful lot easier to spot people on the edge of a crowd than it is in the middle of a crowd, so it's worth doing that, but recognizing that if you're in the middle of a crowd, it's also easy to get pickpocketed, so just balance your choices there. And noise and voice. Try not to make too much noise, because noise brings attention, and also if you've got a particularly distinctive voice, or alternatively, it's actually quite easy when people are walking around. People will recognize, when a French person speaks, or an Italian speaks, or someone from a different nation. You can actually tell the accents when they're speaking, even if they're trying to speak the same language. So do bear that in mind as you're going around. So as soon as you open your mouth, the likelihood is people will identify the place around the world you actually originate from. Atmospherics as well. So as you're moving around, the real sort of thumb rule for this is the presence of the abnormal and the absence of the normal. What do I mean by that? So the presence of the abnormal. So do you know what? If you look here, if it's usually you're down a marketplace and it's a fairly busy place, but actually, do you know what? You're going there and there's an absence of the normal. So there's all these crowds out there. Do you know, that's a little bit worrying. Quite often if something's about to happen, a lot of nations, where there's perhaps terrorist activity or sort of there's, sort of a hearts and minds kind of campaign going on. Those hearts and mind campaigns typically to try and win over the local population. So there'll be perhaps a tip off to kind of like say, do you know what, just don't go down there. This is actually for those people that we're actually targeting. So if it looks empty and it's normally busy, then be concerned, and you know what, come back later. If you're going shopping and you're just grabbing some bits of food, come back later and get it. It's always worth just a walk away and come back when it's when you feel it's safe. Another place is to know what's going on. Keep an eye on that FCO threat map that I've mentioned on a number of these training sessions now. So go onto the FCO's website, type in the country that you're in, and you'll be able to see the charts as to what's going on, and just be able to stay up to date as to sort of the threats are. Likewise, I've talked in the past about understanding where the bad areas in the nation are. There's an awful lot of information available either online or talking to local people, and that's a real sort of top tip on that. Chat to locals, become trusted by locals so that you can get the tips and the heads up really early. And bottom line with all of this is trust your gut feeling. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Go away. It's worth doing that 10 times for the one incident where something may have happened, and you know what, you've just been saved. Even if it means that on that 9 occasions, you know what, you've just gone and wasted half a day or whatever it is. Trust your gut feeling. If it doesn't feel right, just walk away. So that's a brief canter through how to live and transit through dangerous countries. If you've got any questions, just chuck them in down to the bottom as always. And as always, to save you a pile of writing and notes, or if you want to refresh this later, easiest ways to find this video again is just to click subscribe. And that is living in dangerous countries. And I will see you in the next session.